next speakers are two thought workers. So the next two talks we're going to be doing are a little bit more craft focused. We're going to get a case study out of two of our folks here in Melbourne, and then we're going to be throwing it further afield to chat to two more thought workers who are based in North America. So the next people I'll throw to here in Melbourne, Sandy Fraser is a senior software developer here in ThoughtWorks in Melbourne, and Micah Sargison is an experienced designer, also based out of Melbourne. They've both been working on the same project for the best part of the last 12 months, working in the 3D modeling space for a retail client here in Melbourne. Fascinating work. Their talk's called Building Digital Spaces for the Physical World. But basically, customers today expect simple and seamless experiences. So how do you create a digital tool that manages the complexities of designing in a 3D space that provides not only utility in planning and design, but inspiration, enables users to explore their ideas, boost their confidence in what they're designing. So they're going to reflect on their experiences working on that in the last 12 months. And I'll throw to you, Micah and Sandy. Thanks for joining us as well.
Thanks very much, Jake.
So, hi, I'm Sandy. I'm a developer and 3D artist at ThoughtWorks.
And hello, everyone. My name is Micah. I'm an experienced designer with ThoughtWorks as well. So as Nick mentioned, today we're going to be talking about building digital spaces for the physical world. As he mentioned as well, over the last 12 months, we've been working on a tool to help customers plan and design rooms in their home, starting with the bathroom. Today, we're going to focus on two things. Firstly, some of the considerations and challenges when designing experiences in 3D. And then more broadly, how to approach this kind of product development, how we structured our team and how we work together to solve some pretty tricky design and tech challenges. Before we get into all that detail, we'll like to start with a bit of a customer journey.
This is a pretty common story about a couple who have recently bought a small townhouse. It was livable, but it needed work, particularly in the kitchen where the cabinets were falling apart and in the bathroom where the space was poorly utilized and the plastic veneer tiles had damp seeping up behind them. The bathroom was actually two rooms, a narrow toilet room next to a longer main bathroom. All up, the room was 1.7 meters wide and 4.5 meters long. But because of the interior wall, storage, and 4 door swings, almost a third of the room was pokey and hard to use. There were other quirks too, like the bathtub that sat 20 centimeters higher than normal to fit the plumbing in, making stepping in and out of it quite dangerous. There was a bedroom at either end. Bedroom 1 was the larger, but the bathroom sort of jutted out into it, made worse by being abutted by a wardrobe. They didn't know what they wanted, but they took the first step of drawing up the existing plan and then experimented with it to see how it could be made better. This is a theme that we'll revisit throughout this talk. The first thing they did was remove the dividing wall. This meant they only needed one entrance to the room, and by using a sliding door, they could eliminate all door swings and make full use of the space. After a few iterations, they found that they could declutter the room by removing the storage. This shrunk the bathroom so much that it added 1.3 meters to the bedroom. With the bedroom more square, the wardrobe could be moved to a more accessible spot and increased in size. Let's have a look at the app itself. Here's the bathroom in plan view, and here it is in 3D. Since they had drawn the plans in 3D, they could see that the room would work a lot better without a bathtub. So they select a bathtub and delete it. They reduced the height of the block, but kept it high enough to fit the plumbing in. The shower recess still needed a step, but it would no longer be dangerous. Then they deleted the bath mixer and moved the shower mixer to a more accessible position. The app let them explore options and try a variety of real products. They were surprised to discover they could hang the vanity from the wall. Trying it out was a snap, and they felt that it suited the room. The lost storage space could be compensated for by placing a bigger mirror cabinet above, which turned out to improve the look even further. After experimenting with finishes, they settled on a layout and style that they could take to tradespeople. They found a tiler who could do most of the work and who knew other tradies to do the plumbing and wiring. He had a few suggestions for changes which were easy to incorporate. The tiler, who was used to dealing with vague specifications, was thrilled to have a full 3D model to work with. He printed out the designs and stuck them up on the wall for reference while working. From our research, we were beginning to understand our customers' approach to realizing their new bathroom.
So yeah, from their initial dream, there were a lot of steps to take and decisions to make in sort of realizing their new bathroom. These decisions often rely on input from other people, like family members, plumbers, builders, and tilers. And so getting everyone aligned on your vision is not easy. We had identified many things that we could do to improve this journey, but fairly early on, planning and visualization were really the area where our users had the most difficulty and where we believed we could help them the most. What we wanted to do was to allow people to iterate over their plans by incorporating ongoing research and then sharing those plans with others to get feedback.
Speaking to our users, we heard things like, we don't know how much it will cost, but it's going to be quite a lot. Spaces are small. We're not sure what will fit. We need to figure out what's most important. We don't know if we'll like it when it's done. And will it be functional? Does this sound familiar? As professional developers and designers, we may be more confident, but we are still cautious about our plans. So how did we start? Well, much the same way you would start your own home renovation. The idea that you'll know it when you see it was true for both what the user is trying to achieve and what we were developing. While there were a lot of unknowns about our solution, the goal of our customers was quite clear. They needed to see their bathroom and to be able to iterate over the design, just like we do when we design a product. We started with what we knew and went from there, even though we didn't quite know where we would end up.
Yeah, I suppose what we knew were 2D design and prototyping tools. So it made prototyping in 3D quite difficult. So we sketched our scene and sort of made it interactive, allowing users to kind of go through and click on things and move around the scene. This really helped us sort of nail down some of the broad interaction patterns, but really it only got us so far. In our research, we also discovered that the quality of 3D renders in day-to-day life had elevated customers' expectations. This product we were building was going to be featured on TV, and it was actually supposed to sell bathroom products. So they needed to appear as lifelike as possible. The scary part for us was that we were targeting the browser, which has pretty limited power compared to the technology used to render scenes and things like apartment brochures.
The technology, which was mostly open source, was also new to us. We needed to learn its possibilities and constraints. So we started by making a room with 4 walls, and that was progress. Next, we began testing models and materials. These needed to look real. Clearly, prison chic was not a version of reality that we wanted, so we had a long way to go. Just how far was unclear. I guess there were a lot of details to flush out.
So yeah, initially we had expected the design to change, I suppose, more at a macro level, the kinds of interactions users want to perform as they go through their journey. In this section, we'll unpack what actually happened by looking at a few different layers of the user experience. So through the early prototypes, we had identified the features and functionality that we believed we needed for our users to achieve their goals. This layer was, I suppose, the big picture, the real world benefit the customer would get from using our product. We'd also explored information hierarchy that would underpin the experience. And this was really to help them make sense of the products and their plans. We really wanted to be careful here not to overwhelm the user. So we used progressive disclosure, like concealing information until it was absolutely relevant, to keep the experience as simple as possible. We knew that 3D software has a pretty steep learning curve. So there were a lot of unknowns about the interaction layer. Users often have trouble orientating themselves and using what are essentially 2D input devices, like your mouse and keyboard, to control a 3D space. We wanted a tool that anyone could pick up and put a fairly good plan together without reading a manual. So this was going to be a challenge. The surface layer is the last thing we focused on. However, it is actually what our users experience first. People are very quick to like or dislike something and make immediate judgments about its quality. As we mentioned, this layer is a concern for us. We knew that expectations were high, but we also didn't know what would be technically feasible. On top of that, we had some quite limited time, so we had to make some trade-offs. Do we build more features? Do we give the user more information to help them detail their plans? Do we improve interactions, things like dragging products around the room and snapping them together? Or do we focus on the 3D scene, lighting, shadows, reflections, all the things that make it feel real? So we were surprised by what we learned through our research. We'd come into this thinking, let's help customers make a plan in 20 minutes, start to finish. Great, job done. They've achieved their goal in a short period of time. However, as friction in the interaction layer was reduced and the surface layer became more polished, the feedback we got began to shift. Some of the flaws, like not having all the product information or the ability to download a PDF, seemed to impact the overall experience less. Customers would say things like, I'd spend hours playing with this just to see what it could look like. Users were not just using it to plan, but also to dream. I suppose on the surface layer, we really start to work in the realm of photography, where light and form come together to create an image. So this quote from Richard Mizrach, while in relation to photography, also holds true to 3D. He says, beauty is a delivery system. It engages people when they might otherwise look away. As we've said earlier, renovations are hard. Laying out a small bathroom is hard. 3D software is hard. It all takes persistence. For us to create an engaging experience, there had to be some short-term reward. I shouldn't have to wait until I'm sitting in my new bathtub, What we think here is that aesthetics were changing our users' emotional state. They became more motivated and invested in their design.
Using any kind of app requires building a mental model for how it works. Often that model is abstract, and it's our job as designers and developers to make it easy for the user to understand. With a 3D app, the user brings a mental model with them from their experience of the real world. Any deviation from that could be jarring, so the app needs to behave fairly close to reality. Of course, it's not possible to achieve total realism due to the constraints of the medium, and actually we wouldn't want to achieve it. Sure, there are some things that we just can't do, but there are other ways that we can do even better. For example, part of the user journey is sharing the plan with other people. If this was reality and the user was building a physical model, they wouldn't be able to easily share it with tradies. So we wanted to aim for reality and miss, but miss in a way that was enabling rather than frustrating. Delightful rather than creepy. Let's talk about how hard it is to hit that target through the lens of complexity.
So consider some different types of apps that you might build, ranging from a 1D console app, to commands in the terminal, I suppose, to an immersive VR experience. How do they differ in complexity? Certainly the console app is more basic than VR, but what does that mean in terms of experience? So it's probably not surprising that apps become easier to understand the closer they get to reality. Console apps, which are one-dimensional, take quite a while to learn. Even finding out what the commands are is tricky. 2D GUIs are better, but are usually abstract and require a special mental model. You know, a lot of UX is focused on communicating this mental model. On the other hand, 3D visualizations are almost instantly understandable, and virtual reality is somewhat effortless. The ease of user input for these systems is also different. Console apps are very quick and easy to use once you understand them. GUIs are fine, but when you get to 3D, things suddenly become much harder because you're manipulating more dimensions than your input devices expose you to. VR doesn't suffer from this and is still innate.
Well, building these things is completely different. Many programmers start out developing console apps where all you have is a stream of text coming in and going out. When I was learning how to make a windowed app, my lecturer said that developing for 2 dimensions is 10 times harder than a 1D console app. Not only do you need to worry about layering, layout and styling, you also need to handle things happening in almost any order. That trend seems to continue. The extra freedom that the user has when working in 3 dimensions makes it much harder to design and build a cohesive user experience. In our app, for example, we found out there are a million ways that a user can get a basin stuck inside a vanity. Having a pre-existing mental model actually makes this harder because deviations from the expected behavior can be frustrating. We need to be aware of when we can't achieve reality and ensure that we land in a spot that is delightful to the user. Ultimately, the burden of complexity should be borne by the development team so that the user doesn't have to. So how did we deal with this complexity as a team? Well, building an app is a collaborative effort, but design is often personal and is not immune to emotional attachment. You need to be willing to truly listen to each other and work together to find a solution, drawing on each other's experience and knowledge. Devs are the first users of the app and may be the first to notice issues, particularly in complex domains like 3D. Practical limitations will be discovered while developing. By developing in short iterations, we can quickly react to things that we discover along the way. During inception, we set the initial direction of the project. Once we have a backlog of work, we start 2-week iterations, and gradually the product starts to take shape. There are many things that happen during an iteration. Developers estimate any new stories in the backlog, and the product owner prioritizes them, and then we start picking up stories to work on. Towards the end of the iteration, we test the new features with users. At this point, we may be surprised by what we learned, so we improve the design before doing it all again. You've probably seen this all before. What often gets overlooked is that there's an inner loop in which the development happens. Changes in this loop typically take from hours to days and not weeks.
And this is actually where a lot of the unknowns get discovered on a project like this. Sometimes that just means the story will take a little longer than expected, but it often means that the design will have to change and that, you know, we need to be okay with this. It might only be a small tweak, or it could require pivoting quite far from the original design. As a designer, you have some options to avoid stalling the team. You know, you can trust the developers to make good decisions, be ready to help at short notice, or actually sit and pair with developers when it makes sense to do so. In fact, I would recommend doing all of those things. This really gets the idea of bringing capabilities into the team, whether that's designers, 3D artists, or any other discipline that your product needs to be successful. Here you can see the basic structure of our team. We had a product owner, a product manager, and an infrastructure engineer. We also had a group of developers with various skill sets working closely with the experienced designer.
Yeah, and this is what it means to be cross-functional. The less you depend on other teams to get your stories finished, the faster you can move. And within the team, the closer you work together, the faster you can solve problems. The idea of cross-functional teams isn't new, and these days you often have roles like infrastructure engineers embedded in the team. We feel that our team took it even further than normal, with the experienced designer pairing with developers so that the user experience could evolve in real time rather than 2 iterations ahead. If we had had any handoffs between the roles, we wouldn't have succeeded in building a usable product in the time that we did. If there's one thing that we might have done differently, it would have been to bring the vendors in closer. We depended on others to create most of the 3D models. They did good work, but having them at arm's length meant that communication was slow and we would often stall while waiting for each other. We did achieve a lot and we're very proud of the product that we've built. So we'd like you to remember, you don't need to know where you're going to know you're heading in the right direction. Instead, move quickly by trusting your team and letting the shape of your product evolve, working towards agreement rather than working to or handing down requirements. And spend effort on the little things that delight your users.
Cool. So we'll leave it here for our talk. Keep an eye out for the public release coming sometime this year. Yeah, so in the meantime, we'll see if there's any questions.
Thanks, folks. That was really great. I've been close to the project, so yeah, it was good to actually take a step back and hear it from the perspective of the folks on the team. I think, you know, it's often fun to come back and break apart work you've done to think about how you would explain it to other people. I found that really thought-provoking. Actually, two questions have come into this, and we can probably sort of team up on answering them. First one is from Anonymous, who's been asking a lot of questions today, to be honest. Their question is, good software, widely applicable. Who owns the intellectual property? Is it your client? So what happens when another potential client who is a bathroom designer asks you for similar functionality? I can probably pick that one up from a professional services management perspective. Yeah, as consultants, all the work we do, all the products we build, all that code and other things we generate is the intellectual property of our clients. Everything we do belongs to them. If another client who was a bathroom designer came along and asked for something similar, then that's probably the only thing they'd have in common. So they probably have different tech constraints, probably different tech strategies and opportunities. Their customers are probably going to have different needs and different motivations. Them as a business are probably going to have slightly different things that they want to achieve out of whatever they're going to take to market. So just because tools might look similar or do similar things doesn't mean that you are going to build them or approach them in the same way, or all the other sort of things that sit behind the scenes on that. So that's probably the best answer I can give you, is that yeah, this all belongs to our client, and should there be another bathroom designer that comes along that wants to build something similar, then there's probably enough that changes behind the scenes that we go back to the drawing board, so to speak. The next question's from Andrew Hamilton, and this is a little bit more of a technical one. Sandy's smiling because he knows Andrew. So does the client provide the assets based on the products that they offer? What does maintainability look like as their product lineup changes and new assets need to be added to the tool?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, they are real products provided by the client. They have, I believe, all of the CAD data for those models. There's another supplier who is working on converting those to a format that is suitable for use in our app. So they have a pipeline of their own. It's automated, and they just need to add metadata to the models so that we can use them. And then they provide them to us, and again, in an automated way, we upload them into the systems that our tool consumes.
Thanks for that, Sandy. That's a great one. This is a great question, and this is one I was hoping would come up, and I'll throw this to both of you. Did you play The Sims much when trying to figure this out?
Sims specifically, maybe not. We did explore a lot of different apps and games and things like that. You know, definitely we took a lot of inspiration from games. You know, I suppose there was always this trade-off between how flexible do we make the tool, how much control do we give people over the experience, versus how easy it is to use and how enjoyable it is to use. I suppose we were quite fortunate in that we were designing for a somewhat limited, you know, space, a room in the bathroom, and things would behave in certain ways. For example, you know, products are often fixed to the wall. So, you know, we could take a lot of that sort of manual effort out of placing a product on the wall by, you know, they automatically rotate and they stick to the wall and they'll move up the wall. And so in that way, yeah, it does start to take inspiration from things like Sims and games. Anything to add, Sandy?
Yeah, only just that. In my mind, when I was working on this, I was always thinking of Animal Crossing, which is another great example of a good user experience.
Yeah, Sims was an interesting one that was brought up early in the process. I think when we were talking about, you want to find, patterns that users are familiar with. And I think we identified at a point on this project that there was a certain cohort of, the potential users for this, people of a certain age who, go back to the original story we told there, have just bought a townhouse and are renovating the bathroom. There's a proportion of those who played The Sims when they were in high school or at uni, or maybe still play it today. No judgment. People can play The Sims at any age, any stage of their lives. So there was patterns within that people were familiar with. This is not an unnatural thing for a lot of people to be doing on a computer. It might just not be in the way they solve this particular problem.
Yeah, actually, that was something that was really great. Was some people in the early group of testers were gamers, and some of the feedback they had really enhanced the user experience, and they brought the experience that they had from games. So, things like they expected the camera to move in a certain way, and we could make little tweaks to suit that.
Great stuff. All right, we're on past. Thank you so much, Micah, Sandy. Great talk. Really good to sort of see your reflections on that work, and I think a lot of us are very keen to see this launch. Keep an eye on thoughtworks.com. We'll be making a song and dance about it when it goes out there, and we're very excited to be a part of that project. And thanks again for both of you taking some time out of your morning to share that story with us. And yeah, thanks again.